The world of Zereth 9 was silent. The winds blew across the empty deserts, lifting red dust into the sky. Old metal ruins from ancient battles lay buried beneath the sand. But today, something important was happening here. In the center of the dead world stood a large silver dome. It shimmered under the pale sun, guarded by floating AI drones. This was the meeting place. Neutral ground were too powerful. Civilizations had agreed to talk, humans and the Valari Dominion. Inside the dome, a human soldier stood tall, eyes sharp and back straight. Sergeant Elias Ward, known among his people as one of the best. His armor was dark gray, scratched from past battles, but his face showed calm focus. He had seen many wars, but this meeting was not about war. It was about peace, or so they said. Across the room, the Valari delegation entered. They looked elegant, tall, and otherworldly. Their skin shimmered like glass, and their eyes glowed faintly. In the center walked a woman unlike the others. She wore a flowing silver robe and a thin crystal crown. She was Princess Kailari, the heir to the Valari throne. The air seemed to freeze for a moment as Kailari entered. Everyone stood still. She walked with grace, but her eyes scanned the room like a soldier. Elias watched her carefully, noting every movement. Then her eyes locked with his. For a few seconds, everything else faded. I felt like time slowed down. Kailari frowned slightly. This human, he wasn't afraid. Most beings looked away when she stared at them. It's not him. She tilted her head, curious. Slowly, she walked toward him. Her guards shifted nervously, but she raised one elegant hand. They stayed back. Now she stood just a few steps away from Elias. She looked directly into his eyes, trying to read his mind. Feel his thoughts with her Valari powers, but she couldn't. There was a strange silence in his mind, a quiet wall of discipline and willpower. No fear, no panic. Just stillness. Kailari blinked, surprised. Then she spoke, her voice soft yet strong. "Why are you looking at me so deeply, human?" Elias didn't flinch. His voice was calm and deep. "Because you're trying to read me, but I'm not a book you get to open." Silence followed. Even the guards seemed unsure of what to do. Then, to everyone's shock, Kailari smiled. It was small, barely a curve of her lips, but it was real. She stepped back slightly, then turned to the others. "Let the talks begin," she said. Hours passed. The two delegations sat at long tables, speaking through translators. Words of peace, trade, and future friendship filled the air, but behind the smiles, tension remained. Elias stood quietly behind the human ambassador. He scanned the Valari side, always alert. His eyes often returned to the princess. She didn't speak much. She watched. And sometimes she glanced at Elias. At one point, she stood and walked to a corner of the room, pretending to observe a mural. Elias followed, staying within security range. She spoke softly without turning. "Do all human soldiers have such?" "Strong minds," Elias answered without hesitation. "Most don't get the luxury of soft thoughts." Kailari turned to face him. She studied him again, his eyes, his stance, the small scars on his face. "You are different. Not like the others I've met." "It goes both ways," he replied. She nodded slowly. "Tell me, what do humans want from us?" Elias looked at her carefully. "Peace, respect, maybe trust. But we don't expect it. We earn it, or we don't." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "If we decide you're too dangerous." He shrugged. "Then we prepare." Like always. Another pause. She wasn't used to this honest answers without fear or flattery. It fascinated her. Then an explosion shook the dome. Boom. The ground trembled. The lights flickered. Within seconds, chaos broke out. Guards shouted. AI drones activated their defense systems. Kailari looked shocked, but only for a moment. Elias was already moving. "This way," he shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a side exit. "Unhand the princess," one of the Valari guards yelled. "Then keep up," Elias snapped. They ran through a narrow hallway as gunfire echoed behind them. It wasn't clear who the attackers were, but they weren't just after humans. Whole Summit was under siege. Kailari followed Elias, surprised by his speed and calm. He took sharp turns, disabled traps, and led them down a maintenance shaft into the depths below the dome. Finally, they reached a small chamber and old storage room from the war. Elias slammed the door shut and sealed it with a code. Both of them breathed heavily. Kailari leaned against a wall, brushing dust from her robe. Her crystal crown was gonna left behind in the escape. "You dragged me through smoke, debris, and a rusted pipe," she said. "You're welcome," Elias said, checking his weapon. "Should be angry, but you're not." She looked at him. "No, I'm curious." "You saved me without hesitation." "Why?" He looked at her, not smiling, not joking. "'Cause you're not just a diplomat. You're someone's daughter. I don't leave people behind." Kailari blinked. No one had spoken to her like that before. Not her advisors, not her bodyguards, not even her family. Just then, a noise came from above. Someone was searching the upper halls. Elias stepped closer to the door, weapon ready. Kailari stood beside him, her voice low. "Do you think we'll survive?" "That depends," Elias said, checking his ammo. "Can you fight?" Kailari raised an eyebrow. "I command fleets. I don't carry rifles. Then stay behind me. And if we make it out, maybe we'll finish that conversation." "Which one?" she asked. "The one about what humans really want?" She nodded slowly. "It's very well, human. Let's survive. And then we'll see." The air inside the storage room was heavy. Sergeant Elias Ward stood at the door, his weapon ready. The sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway above. Dust fell from the ceiling with each rumble of distant gunfire. Princess Kailari stayed silent. Beside him, her silver robe was torn at the edges. Her glowing eyes flicked between Elias and the sealed door. "Enemies," Elias nodded. "Could be mercenaries. Could be someone from your side. Or mine. Either way there. Not here for peace." Kailari frowned. "Attacking a peace summit is madness." Elias smirked slightly. "Madness is common during peace talks. Some people fear peace more than war." Suddenly, a loud bang hit the metal door. Something heavy the enemy had found. Then Kailari stepped back, sparks of energy forming at her fingertips. Kailari could control mental energies. Some used it for defense. Others, like Kailari, could focus it into blasts. "Stay behind me," Elias ordered, lifting his rifle. Kailari gave him a sharp look. "I am not helpless." Elias didn't flinch. "Didn't say you were. It's just saying I'm harder to kill." The door burst open. A blast of smoke filled the room as armed figures rushed inside. Their armor didn't carry human or Valari markings. Rogues? Maybe hired killers. Someone didn't want this summit to succeed. Elias moved first. To shots clean quick. One attacker fell. The second ducked, but Kailari struck him with a wave of mental force, slamming him into a wall. The others hesitated. Bad idea. Elias charged forward using a broken pipe as cover. He slid low, fired upward, then rolled aside. Another enemy dropped. Kailari stayed behind, focusing. A third attacker tried to grab her, but she touched his temple and his mind collapsed in pain. He screamed and fell unconscious. In seconds, the attackers were down. Elias checked their weapons. High-tech, not cheap. Someone funded this. Kailari stood near a fallen body, her eyes hard. "These aren't simple raiders." "No," Elias agreed. "Someone wants us both dead." Later they moved through the underground tunnels. Zerith 9 was full of old war bunkers and ruins. A wrist scanner to map a path. Kailari followed closely. The silence between them wasn't cold, it was focused. "I thought humans were chaotic," she said after a while. "We are," Elias replied. "But you fight with control, strategy like a machine." He smiled. "We learned the hard way." Kailari glanced at him. "Tell me something. Why are you really here? You're not a diplomat." "No, I'm a soldier." "Then why send a soldier to peace talks?" Elias slowed his pace and looked her in the eye. "Because peace is most fragile when it begins. Someone has to be ready when things fall apart." Kailari said nothing, but her eyes softened a little. They reached an abandoned control room. Old. Computers blinked weakly. Elias connected a power pack and pulled up a local map. Looks like there's a transport hub 2 kilometers east. Might still have a way to signal our sides. He turned, but Kailari was staring at a broken mirror. Her reflection looked tired, dusty face, blood on her shoulder, hair messy. I don't look like a princess anymore, she muttered. Elias shrugged. Looks don't matter out here. She raised an eyebrow. What does matter then?
Honor.
Grit. The will to do what others won't. She turned to him slowly. You have all those things. Not always. It's just when it counts. Her voice was quieter now. I was trained to see humans as unpredictable, dangerous. Elias chuckled. That part's true. But no one said you were. Selfless. He didn't answer. Instead, he reloaded his rifle. On the way to the hub, trouble found them again. Flying drones, black and silence, potted them from the cliffs above. A red beam scanned the ground. Elias grabbed Kailari and pulled her behind a fallen ship hole. The beam passed just inches from their heads. They're tracking heat signatures, he whispered. Kailari nodded. We can block it. My suit has a cloak field. Only yours? Yes. Elias looked at the approaching drones. Then we improvise. She frowned. You're not thinking of, but he had already moved. He found a half-burned corpse nearby and pulled off a piece of its armor. He placed it over a vent and then lit a heat flare underneath. The drones scanned again, caught the heat, then flew away toward the decoy. Kailari stared at him in disbelief. You tricked them with junk and a flare? It's called misdirection? Elias said, brushing off dust. Classic human move. For the first time, she laughed. A real surprised laugh. They finally reached the transport hub. It was a half-buried building with shattered windows and broken lights. Elias searched for a working console. Inside, Kailari stood near an old map of Zirth 9. She touched it gently. My people fought on this planet long ago, she said. We thought we were bringing order. We only brought ruin. Elias paused. War leaves scars. On planets and people. She turned to face him. Do humans regret war? Every time, he said quietly. Kailari stepped closer. You fight with such fury. And yet, you carry sorrow too. Elias met her gaze. You learn to live with pain. You just don't let it own you. Another pause, this time longer then. Kailari whispered, I never met a human like you. Elias smirked. You've only met one. Suddenly the console beeped. A weak signal came through a coded message from the Human Alliance. They're sending evac teams, Elias said. We need to stay put until they arrive. Kailari nodded. What if more attackers come? Then we fight again. She tilted her head. Are you ever afraid? Elias looked at her. All the time, he said. But fear means you care. I just don't let it stop me. Kailari's expression changed. For the first time, she looked uncertain. You've saved my life twice today. I'll do it again if I have to. Why? He stepped a little closer. Not too close, but close enough. Because you're more than a princess. But you're brave. You think for yourself. And maybe, just maybe, you believe peace is still possible. Kailari swallowed hard. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Why do you look at me like that, human? Elias didn't look away. Because you're starting to see the truth. And I respect that. They stood in silence, the sound of distant engines finally approaching from above. Rescue was coming, but something between them had already changed. The dropship hummed softly as it flew through the pale skies of Zirth 9. Princess. Kailari sat across from Sergeant Elias Ward. Dust and dried blood covered them both. But neither spoke about the chaos they had survived. Not yet. Elias sat with his weapon across his knees, eyes half closed but alert. Kailari watched him. Not just his movements, but his stillness. How he never seemed to lower his guard, even when safe. She had studied human behavior. Her people called them emotional, unstable, even primitive. But the man in front of her was none of those things. He was precise, sharp, quiet, like a hunter. And beneath that cold soldier mask, she sensed something deeper, something burning. Where are we going now? Replied, neutral ground, you'll be safe there. Kailari tilted her head, and you'll be debriefed. Maybe reassigned? She paused. You saved a Valari princess. Doesn't that earn you something? Lys looked at her and said flatly, I didn't do it for a medal. Her heart skipped. It wasn't just what he said, it was how easily. He said it like it was normal to protect others without reward. No one in her court did anything without gain. No one but him. At Outpost Deneen, the base was quiet but tense. Human officers nodded at Elias as he walked past, but many stared at Kailari. It wasn't every day a Velati royal stepped into a human military base. Kailari followed, Elias through metal halls and cold lights. He said little, but never let her fall behind. When she tripped slightly on loose wiring, he caught her elbow without a word. She watched his hand pull away. No comment, no smile. Just duty. But it didn't feel cold. It felt real. Later they sat. In a private room, Kailari looked out the window at the red desert beyond. Elias stood nearby, arms crossed, watching her reflection in the glass. Something still bothering you, he said. She turned. Yes. Speak. Kailari walked toward him slowly. Back on Zerith 9, when the attackers came, you didn't hesitate. You protected me. You fought without fear, but also without hate. Elias stayed silent. Kailari continued. My people were taught that humans are reckless. That you fight because it's in your nature. He spoke Nolo and firm. We fight because we don't have the luxury not to. She blinked. What do you mean, Elias? Looked her in the eyes. Of empires, mind powers, and fleets. Of ships. We had Earth. Broken cities. Hunger. We had to fight for everything, even peace. Kailari's voice was softer. But you've grown powerful. Why not stop now? Elias gave a small, bitter laugh. Because the galaxy doesn't let humans forget where we started. He stepped closer, not threatening, just real. Your kind looked down on us, called us savages. Even when we helped win your wars, we bleed, we die. But we're never invited to the table. Kailari's voice shook. That's not how I see you. He leaned in just slightly. No, but you're not like the others, are you? She stared up at him, heart thudding. No, she whispered. I don't think I ever was. That night, Kailari couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her cot, staring at a hollow screen showing her people's news, lies mostly. The report said she was safe and returning soon. It said the attack was unidentified. She knew the truth. Someone had tried to kill her and Elias. Someone didn't want peace. The door beeped softly. It was Elias. I figured you'd be awake, he said. She didn't answer right away, just stared at him. Do you ever rest? She'd finally asked. I rest when others are safe. She shook her head. Can't live like that forever. He stepped into the room. No, but for now, I can. A long silence stretched between them. Then Kailari asked the question that had burned inside her since Sexier-9. Double quotes. Why are you so loyal to people who don't understand you? Elias didn't blink. Because loyalty isn't about being understood. It's about what's right. Kailari stood, stepping closer. You confuse me, human. Good. She smiled. I'm used to knowing everything. Reading minds, seeing fear. And what do you see in me? He asked quietly. Kailari was only inches from him now. She looked up into his eyes. Strength, sadness, and something else. Elias waited. Hope, she said. He didn't reply, but his jaw tightened slightly. That one word seemed to hit him harder than any bullet ever could. The next morning, alarms blared. The base was under alert. One of the escort convoys had been destroyed. Someone was still hunting Kailari. She and Elias were moved to the inner chamber of the base. Inside. Human commanders gathered around a table with maps and data streams. Elias stood at attention beside her. Like a shield, Kailari watched the others. Some of them still looked at her with suspicion. So she did something unexpected. She stepped forward and addressed the humans directly. "I am not your enemy," she said clearly. "The Valari do not seek war, but someone, on either side, is trying to break peace before it begins." The officers glanced at each other. One older general finally spoke. "Then why should we trust you?" Kailari lifted her chin. "Because your soldier trusts me. He's earned your trust more than anyone in this room." All eyes turned to Elias. He said nothing, just gave the smallest nod. The room went quiet. Then the general muttered, "Well, damn, it's hard to argue with." Later, Elias and Kailari stood outside, watching the sunset. The desert looked calm, but they both knew war still simmered under the surface. "You took a risk today," Elias said. "So did you." He looked at her carefully. "You could still leave. Go back to your fleet. And if I stay?" she asked. "Be in danger. I'm used to danger." Elias nodded. "Then stay. But not as a guest, as an ally." Kailari smiled. "And what if I want to stay as something more?" Elias looked at her for a long moment. "Then you better be sure," he said, "because humans, we don't love lightly." Ali reached for his hand, this time without hesitation. "I've been reading minds my whole life," she whispered. "But you, I want to learn your heart the hard way." Elias smiled for the first time in days. "Then let's begin." The night was still, but the air was heavy. Outpost D9 had quieted after the chaos of the day. But inside the walls, tension still crackled like a live wire. Sergeant Elias Ward stood on the observation deck, his eyes scanning the stars. Behind him, Princess Kailari approached silently. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she asked gently. Elias didn't look back. No, Kailari joined him at the edge. The sky above them was wide and cold, dotted with distant stars and warships patrolling beyond the atmosphere. "Any updates?" she asked. Scouts found traces of cloaked transports leaving the sector. No insignia, no survivors, but the pattern fits. Kailari's voice tightened. "Saboteurs." Elias nodded. "Whoever tried to kill us at Zereth 9 is still moving. Quiet, fast, like ghosts." Kailari stared out at the stars. "They want to destroy the peace before it takes root." Elias glanced at her. "And you still want to fight for it?" She met his eyes. Now, more than ever. The next day, the base held a secret meeting. Only a few trusted officers were present. Kailari stood beside Elias, now wearing a more practical version of her ceremonial robe-tuffer fabric, armored shoulders, and a communicator on her wrist. She looked every part a diplomat ready for battle. General Rourke pointed at a screen showing two figures. One was a high-ranking Valari admiral. The other, human senator. These two, the general said, have been secretly communicating. Neither side was aware. Both want this treaty to fail. Elias frowned. "Why?" Rourke tapped the table. "Power. War makes profit. Peace doesn't." Kailari's voice was calm, but hard. "They're willing to kill their own people, just to keep control." "Worse," Elias said. "They're working together." Rourke turned to him. "We can't expose them yet. Not until we have proof strong enough to hold in both human and Valari courts." Kailari stepped forward. "Then give us a mission." That room fell silent. Elias looked at her. U.S. Kailari nodded. "You and I together. We infiltrate. We find the evidence." The general raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting a joint human-Valari operation?" "Off the record." Kailari looked. "To Elias, we trust each other. That's more than our people can say right now." Elias gave a slow nod. "We go dark. We find the truth." Rourke sighed. "You've both got nerve. I'll give you gear, a ship, and 10 hours. After that, you're on your own." Hours later, the two boarded a small stealth cruiser Kailar. Strapped in beside Elias, the ship, dark and silent, launched into orbit without alerting any major sensors. They flew toward a deep space relay station once thought abandoned, now believed to be the meeting point for traders. Inside the cockpit, Elias checked the coordinates. Kailari leaned close to adjust the scanner. Their shoulders touched. She didn't move. Neither did he. The silence was deep, but not awkward. There was understanding, and it's solid and warm. Back when I trained as a soldier, Elias said quietly, they taught us to always distrust aliens. Kalar glanced at him, and now, I don't trust species, he replied. I trust individuals. She smiled. And I trust you, Elias Ward. Even when your face scares me, he raised an eyebrow. My face. She laughed softly. It's always serious. Like you're carrying the weight of 10 planets. He smirked. Maybe. I am at the relay station. They docked silently. Inside, the lights flickered, and the air smelled of metal and dust. Elias moved ahead with his rifle raised. Kailari followed, her senses alert. They found the command deck after passing a series of empty halls. Their data logs were still running. Elias. Plugged in a decryptor? Bingo, he whispered. A series of hollow recordings played. Secret meetings, data exchanges, deals made in shadows. The senator and the Velari, admiral laughing, signing covert documents. Plotting assassinations, spreading lies. Kailari's face grew pale. This is treason on both sides. Elias nodded. And now we've got proof. But before they could upload the files, the power died. Darkness swallowed the room. Elias turned quickly, aiming into the black. Kailari lit her hand with a soft energy glow. We're not alone. A figure dropped from above. Elias fired, but it dodged fast. The enemy was cloaked in adaptive armor, mercenary enhanced. Kailari shot a blast of mental energy. The attacker staggered but didn't fall. Elias moved like lightning, dropped, rolled, fired again. This time the shot pierced the enemy's leg. The figure screamed and fell. Kailari rushed forward and knocked him unconscious with a pulse. Elias examined the body. Same gear as the Zirith attackers. Kailari picked up a small metal badge from the attacker's belt. Her hands trembled. This emblem. It's from my personal guard. Elias looked at her. Someone high up planted him. She swallowed. Then the betrayal runs deeper than we thought. They grabbed the data core and ran back on the ship. Alarms blared. Multiple ships were approaching, armed and fast. Both human and Velari. They're jamming our signal, Elias said. They don't want this evidence reaching anyone. Kailari sat at the co-pilot seat. Then we fight our way out. Strap in. Elias took control. Stealth cruiser fired into space, weaving between incoming missiles. Kailari activated a rear shield. 2 on our tail. Hold on. Elias spun the ship downward into a gravity well. The enemy followed. Suddenly, Kailari pressed a button on the console, releasing signal beacon. A tiny pod flew from the ship, holding the data. Elias looked at her. If we don't make it, someone will, she said firmly. They pushed through, the ship shaking violently, then dashed silence. The stars opened wide, and the enemy ships turned away. They're not following, Kailari whispered. Elias smiled, because they think we're already dead. 3 days later, in a secure facility far from any world, the beacon was recovered. The proof of betrayal spread across both civilizations. The senator was arrested. The Velari admiral vanished, fled into hiding, but the peace talks reopened. This time, with caution, but also with hope. Elias and Kailari stood together on a cliff, watching a new base being built, one meant for both species. You did it, Elias said. You started something real. Kailari looked at him. We did. He turned to her. What now? She took his hand. Now, we build more than peace. He looked into her glowing eyes. And if the world doesn't accept that, he asked. She smiled. Then we fight together. Together. And for the first time, Elias Ward didn't feel like a soldier lost in endless wars. He felt like a human who had finally found his place. The skies above the neutral planet, LaRue 7, were painted with the flags of 2 once-divided empires. Velari starships and human cruisers floated together in peace, circling the Grand Unity Hall. It was the first time in galactic history that both sides would officially sign a treaty, not in secret meetings, not under threat, but in front of the entire galaxy, and at the heart of it all stood a human soldier and a Valari princess. Sergeant Elias Ward adjusted his black military jacket. The sharp edges polished, his medals cleaned, though he never wore them with pride. Princess Kailari stood beside him in a newly designed robe. Part royal Valari style, part human armor. She looked radiant, fierce. "Ready? You nervous?" Elias asked. Kailari smirked. "I've spoken to billions with one thought." "This is easy," Elias raised an eyebrow. "I've faced alien beasts, gunships, and assassins. Speaking at peace ceremonies still makes me sweat." Kailari gently touched his arm. "That's because your heart is loud. It speaks even when your mouth is silent." He paused, looked into her glowing lavender eyes, and said with a quiet smile, "You're still reading me." "No," she said. "Now I'm just understanding you." Inside Unity Hall, thousands gathered, dignitaries, diplomats, soldiers, and civilians. Broadcast drones hovered above, streaming the event across galaxies. On the stage, General Rourke and High Counselor Viron, a Velar elder, stood tall. Between them, the Unity Treaty hovered in light. Both men gestured for Elias and Kailari to step forward. As they walked together, whispers filled the room, murmurs from both sides. Some were amazed, some still disapproved. But no one could deny what they had achieved together. The general spoke first. "The blood of our past has soaked into too many worlds. We've fought, we've lost, but now we choose something different, not because it's easy, but because it's right." Viron. "Followed through war, we built walls. Through truth, we broke them. And through the courage of two souls, we now build a bridge." The lights focused on Elias and Kailari. She stepped to the microphone first. "I was born into a palace of silence, where minds were open, but hearts were closed. I believed peace was a strategy, but then I met a human." She looked toward Elias, a man who never read my mind, but showed me everything with his actions. A man who risked his life, not for power, but for peace. Because of him, I am not just Valari. I am something more. Now it was Elias's turn. He stepped up slowly, cleared his throat, and spoke in that calm, grounded voice. "I was taught to fight, not to talk. My planet was built on broken bones and hard choices. I never trusted aliens, never thought they'd trust me." He glanced at Kailari. "But sometimes someone looks at you, and they don't see a weapon. They see a person, a future, and you start to believe it too." He turned back to the crowd. "Double quotes today. I signed this treaty not as a soldier, not as a hero, just as a man who finally found something worth protecting." The crowd was quiet, then rose to their feet. For the first time in galactic history, both sides cheered together. Later that night, the stars above Laura 7 shimmered brighter than usual. Fireworks and lights danced across the sky, but Elias and Kailari stood on the balcony of the Unity Tower, away from the noise, together in the silence. "It's done," Kailari said softly. "The treaty is real." "For now," Elias replied. "But peace is like a fire. You have to feed it, watch it, or it dies." Kailari nodded. "And if someone tries to put it out?" Elias gave her a sideways glance. "Then we relight it together." She smiled. "You always think like a soldier." He leaned on the railing. "You don't?" She looked at the stars, her voice lower now. "No, I think like someone who's tired of pretending she doesn't feel." Elias turned to her. "Kalariar." "You." Before he could finish, a soft beep echoed in his ear. A private channel. From Rourke, he tapped it. "Ward here," Elias the general said, voice serious. "We've picked up something. A coded signal. It's the same encryption from the traitors you exposed." Elias stood upright. "Where?" "Inside Unity Hall, in the lower decks. Someone's trying to detonate the structure." Elias's blood ran cold. "How long?" 10 minutes. Maybe less. Kailari could already tell. "What is it?" "Trouble," Elias said. "Stay here." "No." Kailari. She stepped closer. We faced worse. I'm not letting you run toward death alone. He gave her a look, half protest, half pride, and nodded. Then let's move. In the shadowy lower decks, thick pipes hissed and flickered. The ceremony's noise faded behind them. Elias led the way, weapon ready. Kailari followed, scanning with her wrist scanner. There she pointed. Behind that panel, Elias opened it. A glowing device pulsed with red energy. A bomb. 2 minutes, he muttered. I can't disarm this. Tied to a dead man's switch. A what? If the signal dies, it explodes. Ali frowned. Then someone's still alive? Still holding the trigger? Suddenly, a voice echoed through the metal halls. You humans never learn. From the shadows, a Valari figure stepped out, the missing admiral. Behind him, 3 armed guards. Elias raised his weapon. Don't. The admiral sneered. Should have let the assassins finish you on Zereth? Kailari stepped forward. You betrayed our people. You turned peace into poison. No, the admiral hissed. I saved us from extinction. You would let the humans infect our culture. I stopped it. You stopped nothing, Elias growled. You just delayed the future. The admiral's hand hovered over a small device. Come. Any closer? And we all burn. Kailari suddenly closed her eyes. What are you doing? Elias whispered. Reading, she said. His mind. I can't control him, but I can see. She focused, trembling slightly. He's scared. Not of death, but of being forgotten. Elias narrowed his eyes. Then let's make sure he's remembered for his failure. He moved like lightning one shot. Not at the admiral, but at the bomb. Right at the control panel, sparks flew. The signal jammed. Kailari threw out a shield just in time. The explosion was small, controlled. The failsafe disabled. The admiral screamed in rage and fired. But Elias had already ducked. Kailari blasted the guards with a mental wave. In seconds, it was over. Back above, the crowd still cheered. Unaware, but in the shadows. 2 souls had saved peace once again. A day later, Elias and Kailari stood at the edge of a lake on Earth. The water was still. The trees swayed softly in the wind. He wore no armor. She wore no robe. Just 2 people. Do you think we'll always have to fight? She asked. Elias took a deep breath. Maybe, but now we know what we're fighting for. Kailari looked into his eyes. You never looked at me like others did. Elias smiled. You never acted like the others. Pause. Then she asked quietly, What do you see when you look at me now? Elias reached out, brushed a hair from her face. I see someone worth everything. She leaned into him, and this time there were no wars. No missions, just the soft sound of a kiss under Earth's sky. Together, human and alien, no longer enemies, but partners, maybe even something more.